Hey, thanks for tuning in. Welcome to the next part in the series of Anyone Can Climb 7A. The focus of this video is on strength training. It's key to remember that strength training isn't essential to climb 7A, but there's some things that you can do to really boost your chances. Feeling a little bit fragile tonight. I did a big training session today after 2 days of rest, and it always feels hard on the first day back after some rest. So today, what did I do? It was, I started with some, obviously a warm-up, my normal sort of warm-up routine, which felt hard on its own. But once I was kind of recruited and felt a bit more with it, I did a power pull session. I don't know if you've seen my video on that, I'll link it somewhere over here. So I did a power pull session. I did it with the most weight that I've ever used on the power pulls, just to really focus on strength. I'm going with the theme of today's video, I guess. It felt a little bit harder than normal, but I still managed to really keep that explosiveness up, which is key for that session. So yeah, that was really good. After that, I did a max hang session. So I've started playing with a tension block and a strain gauge, something called a progressor. I think it's hung up just here actually. So yeah, I mean essentially you pull on the block. This Gucci bit of kit links with your phone and it tells you how much force you're pulling within kilos. It's all a bit nerdy, but it's really good actually for doing some one arm maximum stuff. After that I did a aero power repeater session, so kind of low intensity fingerboarding 7 on 3 off repeaters, which really burned today. I've been tweaking that session ever so slightly and just trying to follow a slightly different method. And yeah, my forearms were absolutely wrecked by the end of it, but it feels so beneficial, and hopefully, fingers crossed, touch wood, will mean that when I get to Spain in a few weeks' time, I'll be really fit. We'll see. Today's video is the second part of the Anyone Can Climb 7A series. This video is about strength. The first thing that I want to get across to you all watching is I don't think you need to do any specific strength training to climb 7A. And I can almost hear people getting their pitchforks ready because that might be a contentious thing to say. I think it's possible to climb 7A without any specific strength training, but that's not to say you shouldn't do some sessions where the emphasis is on strength, and I'm going to explain what that can mean throughout this video. Firstly, I just want to define what strength actually means and how it applies to us as climbers. So a loose generic definition of strength would be the maximum amount of force that we can output for a short period of time. Okay, so think pulling on a really small hole really hard, that is strength. In climbing, we care about relative strength, and what that means is the amount of strength we have relative to our body weight. So if we can pull really hard but we're really heavy, then our relative strength might be lower than somebody who can pull as hard but is lighter. That's not to say the key is to lose weight. That is not what I'm saying at all. Obviously, being a healthy weight is important. What I'm trying to say is that being strong relative to your body weight is a key aspect of climbing hard, and in particular, climbing 7A. Another reason it's important to build a good level of strength is because as your strength gets higher, the relative difficulty of the moves is lower, which means that for a given move you don't have to try quite as hard. So over the course of an entire route, if every single individual move feels easier and is relatively easier because you're stronger, you get less tired. So being strong also helps your endurance. When we think about building strength for 7A, we really need to focus on muscle recruitment and not muscle size. Simply put, that means our muscles are using as many of the muscle fibers that we have already as possible to be strong, rather than gaining extra muscle fibers or growing the size of those muscle fibers to be strong. Again, going back to what I just said about relative strength, if we have more muscle, we're heavier, our relative strength drops. Whereas if we have more recruited muscles, our strength goes up, our relative strength goes up because our body weight should stay the same. Any strength training should form the basis of any training program. There's no point training endurance, there's no point training power, there's no point training power endurance if you're not strong. Let's think of climbing performance as a cup of coffee. Strength training forms the cup on the outside. Everything else, the endurance, the power, the conditioning, the tactics, the attitude. Those things form the content of the cup, the coffee, okay? Without the strength, without the cup, we don't have a base for any level of performance without a good level of strength. So in a training program, strength should form part of the base phase. We should do a period of training that focuses on strength training before we move on to power endurance or power endurance. It's really important that you don't overdo the strength training. For strength training to work, the intensity needs to be really, really high. But with that, the volume needs to be really low. If we have high intensity, high volume, that is a classic way to get injured. So it's really important to make sure your sessions are quality and make sure that they are intense, but that the volume of sessions you do is actually quite low. So I generally would say to people, 2 strength sessions a week is more than enough. If you feel like you need to do more than 2 strength sessions a week, then I would imagine that the intensity of your strength sessions is wrong, or you're lacking something else within your cup of coffee to enable you to perform. In my opinion, the best way for anybody who wants to climb 7A to get really strong and strong enough to climb that grade is to go bouldering. Bouldering is absolutely fantastic for developing strength whilst developing the movement skills that are going to allow you to climb hard. Remember, climbing is a skill-based sport. Being strong is one thing. Being strong definitely helps. But if you don't have the movement skills to back that up, then you're not going to climb hard. Because strength training needs to be really specific to the sport, it's really important that when bouldering to get strong, you make your bouldering as specific to the type of route that you intend on climbing. If the routes that you want to climb are 45 degrees overhanging, then your bouldering should incorporate some 45 degree overhanging terrain so that you're used to training on that kind of ground. If you're somebody who climbs on granite slab sport climbs, then your training should predominantly be on that kind of ground. The strength that you develop needs to be really specific to the type of climbing that you want to do. Remember, it's really key that any bouldering that you do to get strong for route climbing is really intense. If the bouldering isn't intense, then you're not going to be getting strength gains. To give you an example of the kind of session that you could do on a bouldering wall for some strength gains. This can be done indoors or outdoors, but the problem with doing it indoors is that often the style of problems are quite dynamic, quite compy, and they don't really relate very well to outdoor climbing. Obviously, the problem with doing it outdoors is that it rains quite a lot and you can't do that all year. Also, outdoors you've got to find problems that are all close together, so there's only some venues that really lend themselves to that kind of training outside. The session's really simple. You're going to pick 6 boulder problems, which are just below your maximum grade. We normally need to be operating at around about 90% of our maximum to get any strength gains. Once you've picked those 6 problems, you want to make sure that you know them quite well so that we can remove any technical errors that might mean that you don't do the boulder problem. You're going to do each of the 6 problems 3 times. Between each climb, you'll have 3 minutes rest, and then between each boulder problem, you'll also have 3 minutes. So you'll climb problem 1, rest 3 minutes, climb it again, rest 3 minutes, climb it a third time, rest 3 minutes, climb problem 2, rest 3 minutes, climb problem 2, again, rest 3 minutes, and so on. The problems need to be really hard for you, but you want to try and complete every single problem. Try and ensure that the style of problem is fairly similar to the style of climbing that you want to do outside. And what's really important in this session is that you rest properly between each attempt. You need to be fully recovered so that you can try as hard as possible on every single problem. If that means that you need to extend the rest period longer than 3 minutes, you're totally okay to do that. We don't want to have any endurance element to this session. So if you need to rest for 5 minutes, 8 minutes, 10 minutes, feel free to do that, that's fine. I firmly believe that you don't actually need to do any fingerboarding to gain strength to climb 7A. However, that's not to say you couldn't do some fingerboarding to supplement your actual training. So you might find that doing 1 bouldering session, 1 route session, and 1 fingerboard session in a week allows you to do 3 really good quality sessions without absolutely destroying your skin, which might mean that you can climb again the following week. Beginners have obviously got to be really careful with fingerboarding. That's not to say a beginner climber or somebody working up to climbing 7A shouldn't fingerboard or can't fingerboard. In my opinion, fingerboarding is really safe as long as you use it in the correct way. Most people get injured when they're fingerboarding because the volume that they do and the intensity that they do is too high too soon, and this is what leads to injuries. Fingerboarding itself is actually quite safe because it's a very static loading in a very safe position, as long as your form is good and as long as the quality of the session is good and you don't go too big. When fingerboarding, and I'll do a separate video on this at some point, and there's loads of information out there already, but engage your shoulders, slightly bend your elbows. So I'll show you what that looks like, because I think a lot of people struggle with this. Let's use my pacemaker, which isn't mounted yet, to demonstrate. I'm going to hold it in position. Okay, so imagine I'm holding onto the jugs. I'm not sure if you can actually see that on the camera, but I want my elbows slightly bent. I'm not fully locked out on my arms. My elbows are slightly bent. Now, my ears should be above my shoulders. I don't want to be in this position when my ears are right next to my shoulders. I want to be in this position, okay? And what I'm doing there is engaging my scapula, okay? And that's going to make my head rise up away from my shoulders. Okay, I'll show you again. Okay, that's the position you want to be in on a fingerboard. As I say, beginners can use fingerboards. There's nothing wrong with a beginner using a fingerboard because you're loading it very statically and that's very safe. Actually jumping around in a boulder problem and loading a hold in like a really crazy, weird direction and a really strange hold that's put on in a really strange direction, that's more likely to cause an injury. One of the sessions a beginner might choose to do is called density hangs, and I've done a video about that already. I'll put a link up here and also in the description of the video. The other fashionable fingerboard session for people to do at the moment is called max hangs. And when I say fashionable, you know, everybody who trains for climbing at the moment seems to be doing a 10-second max hang, either 2 arm or 1 arm, depending on what your level is. I don't think for people whose aspiration it is to climb 7A that a max hang is really necessary. Sure, they're really good and they do get you really strong, but actually just by bouldering and doing some supplementary density hangs, I think you'll be strong enough to climb 7A. The final bit of strength training that somebody who aspires to climb 7A should be doing is some general conditioning. I think you can break that down into 3 areas. The first area is some pull-ups. Just doing some general body weight pull-ups is great and it's more than enough. You can progress onto weighted pull-ups if you find pull-ups particularly easy. For example, somebody with a background in gymnastics might find pull-ups quite easy, whereas somebody who's never done any sport before might not even be able to do 1 pull-up. Progressing to a point where you can do 5 sets of 5 pull-ups is more than enough to climb 7A. Another area of conditioning that you really need to focus on is core training. The reason core is important is because it allows you to transfer the weight from your feet through your entire body. If your core is floppy, your feet cut loose quite a lot. You aren't able to drive with your legs and use your feet as effectively as you should be able to. So some core training is really important. Personally, I like doing core either on the floor or on a bar. If I'm doing core on a bar, I generally do 3 to 5 sets of 8 knee raises, or you can progress to knees to elbows if you're good at knee raises already. Floor core is also another great option, but just make sure that it's really varied. Don't just target the abs, make sure you get all the muscles that are along the side involved as well. So things like plank, side plank, crunches, bicycles, there's loads of options for core. There's loads of videos on YouTube already with core workouts. Go and check some out and just keep it varied as well. Don't just get sucked into doing the same workout over and over again. Just do a different one every time. I do, core sort of 2 or 3 times a week depending on my other training. I generally just tag it on to the end of another strength session and maybe once onto the end of an endurance session as well. Doing core is also quite a nice active rest day activity. So, recently I had 2 days off in a row. So the first day I rested completely, the second day I did some core, but I didn't do any other training. The final area of conditioning that you should build into your training is just some antagonistic work. So some press ups, some overhead presses, maybe some bench presses as well if you've got access to that equipment. That's more than enough. You don't need to hammer it here, but it's really important just to keep everything sort of balanced out. As I said at the start of the video, strength training to climb 7A isn't necessary. You can climb 7A without doing any specific strength training, but just tweaking some of the sessions slightly to have an emphasis on strength training will make a massive difference. Bouldering is key. Doing some bouldering of the right style that is similar to your route with appropriate rest, and make sure that you're trying really hard in those bouldering sessions to ensure that you're getting strength gains from it. As well as bouldering, maybe some supplemental fingerboarding, maybe some density hangs because they've got other benefits outside of your pure strength. As well as that, some generic conditioning, pull-ups, core, antagonistics. It's very simple. The key with strength training is consistency. I wouldn't strength train for a week and expect to be stronger. You need to be strength training for 6 weeks, 9 weeks, 12 weeks to see some real improvement. I hope you found that video useful, and I really hope it helps you progress towards climbing 7A. Please subscribe so that you don't miss out on future videos. Give the video a thumbs up if you liked it, and share it with your friends as well so that they can benefit from all that information. You can follow me on Instagram. My name is MikeNolan_climbing. I post loads of climbing related stuff on there from my own personal climbing, training information, coaching, outdoors, indoors. I'm also on Facebook as Mike Nolan Mountaineering. My website is mikenolan.climbing.co.uk. Contact me on there for any coaching, training plans, instruction, guiding, like learn to lead, multi-pitch courses, all of that sort of stuff. Get in touch with me through Instagram or my website if you've got any questions whatsoever. I'm happy to answer them as best I can, whether that's training related questions or anything climbing related. Thanks a lot for watching. Cheers.